In the dust-choked town of Mercy's End, where fathers bartered their daughters like livestock and hope died with the morning dew, one girl's silence would prove louder than all the auctioneer's calls combined. The wooden platform creaked under the weight of another transaction. 17-year-old Serafina Hartwell pressed her back against the general store's weathered wall, watching her three sisters climb down from the marriage market's crude stage, each now bearing a different surname, each clutching a stranger's hand. Sold to the banker's son. The auctioneer's voice carried across Main Street like a death knell. Sold to the preacher's nephew. Sold to the cattle baron's foreman. You can almost taste the desperation in the air, thick as the alkali dust that coated everything in this godforsaken corner of Nebraska territory. The year was 1882, and drought had strangled the life from 3 consecutive harvests. Men traded daughters for debt forgiveness, for supplies, for the promise of one less mouth to feed through the coming winter. Serafina's father, Jeremiah Hartwell, counted coins with trembling fingers. His farm had failed. His wife had died birthing their 4th daughter. And now, watching his eldest 3 girls disappear into marriages that felt more like indenture, his shoulders sagged beneath the weight of choices no man should have to make. "Papa." Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. "What about me?" Jeremiah couldn't meet her eyes. Of all his daughters, Serafina had been his favorite, the one who could read, who helped him with ledgers, who sang while she worked in the garden they could no longer afford to water. She was also the one born with a withered left arm, her hand curled like a dying flower. In a market where men purchased wives for their capacity to bear children and work fields, damaged goods commanded no price. "I'm sorry, child." The words cracked like dry kindling. "You'll have to make your own way." The crowd began to disperse as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky the color of old blood. Serafina remained frozen against the wall, watching her sisters' new husbands load them into wagons like sacks of grain. Margaret, barely 16, was already crying. Ruth, 14, stared straight ahead with the glassy expression of someone whose spirit had just been murdered. And little Clara, just 13, kept looking back at Serafina with eyes that begged forgiveness for the sin of being whole. "Wait." The voice cut through the morning heat like a blade through silk. Deep, rough, commanding. A man stepped forward. From the shadows between buildings, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black coat despite the climbing temperature. His hat brim cast shadows across features that might have been handsome once, before grief carved lines around his eyes and mouth. A silver star gleamed on his chest. "Sheriff's badge. Name's Thaddeus Kane," he said, addressing Jeremiah, but never taking his eyes off Serafina. "I'll take her." The auctioneer sputtered. "But sir, the bidding's closed, and she ain't even wasn't asking." Kane's hand rested on his gun belt with casual authority. "How much?" Jeremiah's mouth worked soundlessly. In all his calculations, all his desperate planning, he'd never imagined anyone would want his broken daughter. I don't," he stammered. $50. Kane produced a leather pouch, heavy with coin. "And I'll cancel the warrant on your boy." Serafina's heart stopped. Her brother Thomas had been caught stealing horses 2 counties over. The bounty on his head was the reason Papa had been forced to sell them in the first place. "Mr. Kane," she said, finding her voice, "I don't know what you think you're buying, but I'm not buying anything." His gray eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something that looked almost like kindness. "I'm offering you a choice. Come with me as my wife. Help me tend my ranch, and you'll have a home. Stay here." He gestured at the emptying street, the closed-up businesses, the defeated men counting their profits. "And you'll be begging for scraps by winter's end." The brutal honesty of it stole her breath. She looked at her father, who was already reaching for the offered coins with shaking hands. At her sisters, growing smaller in the distance. At the town that had never wanted her anyway. "What kind of choice is that?" she whispered. "The only kind this territory offers women like you." Kane's voice gentled slightly. "But I'll give you my word. I won't force anything on you that you don't willingly give. You'll have your own room, your own space, until you decide what you want from this arrangement." Serafina studied his face, searching for deception, for the cruel hunger she'd seen in the eyes of the other bidders. Instead, she found only a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. "Why?" she asked. "Why me?" Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were so low she almost missed them. Because we're both broken things, miss. And broken things understand each other. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. Here was a man who'd lost something precious. She could see it in the careful way he held himself, the wedding ring he still wore on a chain around his neck, the way his eyes went distant when he thought no one was watching. I need an answer, he said. Serafina looked once more at her father, now clutching Kane's money like a lifeline. At the empty platform where her sisters had stood, at the vast expanse of prairie beyond the town limits, where anything might be possible. I'll come, she said. Kane nodded once, sharp and decisive. Gather your things. We leave within the hour. As Serafina hurried toward the tiny shack she'd called home for 17 years, her mind raced with questions. Who was Thaddeus Kane? What had broken him? And what would happen when two damaged souls tried to build something real from the wreckage of their lives? But as she packed her few belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching from the shadows. Someone who didn't want her to leave Mercy's end alive. The wagon lurched over another rut, and Serafina gripped the wooden bench with her good hand. They'd been traveling for 3 hours through country that grew more desolate with each passing mile. Kane sat beside her, silent as carved stone, his eyes scanning the horizon with the vigilance of a man who'd survived too many ambushes. How much farther? She asked, more to break the oppressive quiet than from any real need to know. Another hour. His voice was gruff and used to conversation. Maybe less if the creek hasn't risen. Serafina studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the silver threading through dark hair at his temples, the way his hands held the reins with practiced ease despite the wedding ring that caught. The light with every movement. She'd noticed it immediately, that thin band of gold on his left hand, and wondered at a man who'd taken a new wife while still wearing tokens of his old one. You don't have to keep looking at me like I'm about to. Bolt, she said finally. I gave you my word. Kane's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Most folks find the silence uncomfortable. My late wife used to say I had all the conversational charm of a fence post. There it was, the first crack in his armor. Serafina felt something stir in her chest. Not attraction, exactly, but recognition. The way he spoke of his wife, like her voice still echoed in his ears. How long? She asked gently. 2 years, 3 months, 16 days. The precision of it made her heart clench. Fever took her. And our son. The words hung between them like a physical weight. Serafina understood now why he'd chosen a broken girl from a marriage market. Not for companionship or love, but for someone who wouldn't expect either. Someone who'd accept the ghost of another woman sharing their home. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. Kane's voice hardened. Pity's a luxury neither of us can afford. The landscape began to change as they climbed into rolling hills dotted with scrub oak and juniper. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of sage and something else, water, maybe, or the promise of it. Serafina found herself relaxing despite her circumstances. After 17 years in the dust bowl of Mercy's End, these hills felt like paradise. There, Kane said, pointing ahead. Home. The ranch sprawled across a natural meadow, protected by hills on 3 sides. A 2-story house sat at the heart of it, built from local stone and pine logs, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and one side. Corrals and outbuildings dotted the property, and she could see cattle grazing in the distance, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. It's beautiful, she breathed. It's work, Kane corrected, but she caught the note of pride in his voice. Stock needs tending, house needs keeping, garden needs planting. Hope you're not afraid of getting your hands dirty. Serafina held up her withered arm, the twisted fingers barely able to close into a fist. I've done my share of work, Sheriff Kane, just differently than most. He studied her for a moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of what might have been respect. Thaddeus, he said, if we're to be married, you'd best call me Thaddeus. Are we? She asked. To be married, I mean. Truly. The wagon rolled to a stop before the front porch, and Thaddeus climbed down before answering. He came around to help her down, his hands gentle on her waist despite their rough calluses. That depends, he said, his gray eyes meeting hers. On whether you can stand to build something real with a man who's already buried his heart. Before she could respond, The front door opened, and a woman emerged, tall, angular, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her dark eyes assessed Serafina with the thoroughness of a horse trader examining potentially lame stock. "So," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "This is the girl." "Serafina," Thaddeus said. "Meet Mrs. Cordelia Briggs. She's been keeping house since she was needed." Mrs. Briggs descended the porch steps with the bearing of a general inspecting troops. She walked a slow circle around Serafina, taking in the faded dress, the carefully mended tears, the way she held her damaged arm close to her body. "Scrawny," Mrs. Briggs pronounced. "But she's got backbone. I can see it in how she holds herself." She stopped in front of Serafina, studying her face. "You run from hard work, girl." "No, ma'am." "Good. Because this place will test you in ways you can't imagine." Mrs. Briggs' expression softened slightly. "But it'll also show you what you're truly made of. Come, let me show you to your room." As they climbed the porch steps, Serafina caught sight of something that made her heart skip. Roses. An entire garden of them, trained up trellises and sprawling over arbors, their blooms ranging from deep crimson to pale pink to cream. In this harsh country, they seemed like a miracle. "Who tends the roses?" she asked out. Mrs. Briggs and Thaddeus exchanged a look. "That was Emily's doing," Mrs. Briggs said quietly. "Thaddeus' wife. She had a way with growing things. I've tried to keep them," Thaddeus added, his voice tight. "But they're failing." "Don't have her touch." Serafina moved closer to the nearest trellis, inhaling the sweet fragrance. Even dying, they were more beautiful than anything she'd ever seen. "They're not failing," she said softly. "They're just waiting." "For what?" Thaddeus asked. She turned to face him, and for a moment, the careful walls they'd both built seemed to waver. "For someone to love them again." The silence stretched between them, charged with possibility and fear in equal measure. Then Mrs. Briggs cleared her throat. "Well," she said briskly, "roses don't water themselves. Come along, girl. Let's get you settled." As they entered the house, Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing more than just a threshold. The interior was spacious but somehow hollow, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Family portraits lined the hallway, but she noticed that several frames had been turned face down. "Your room's upstairs," Mrs. Briggs said, leading her up a staircase worn smooth by countless footsteps. "Next to the master bedroom, but with your own door to the hall. Thaddeus thought you'd want your privacy." The room was simple but comfortable. A bed, a washstand, a window that looked out over the rose garden. On the dresser sat a single photograph, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding a baby boy. "That's Emily and little Samuel," Mrs. Briggs said quietly. Thaddeus couldn't bear to put it away, but he couldn't stand to look at it either. "I thought maybe you'd know what to do with it." Serafina picked up the photograph, studying the faces of the ghosts she'd inherited. The woman in the picture looked nothing like her. Where Serafina was dark and angular, Emily had been fair and soft. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet strength that Serafina recognized. "I'll leave it where it is," she said finally. "She belongs here." Mrs. Briggs nodded approvingly. "You'll do, girl. You'll do just fine." But as the housekeeper left her alone with her thoughts, Serafina couldn't shake the memory of those watching eyes in Mercy's end, or the growing certainty that someone didn't want her to find happiness in this place. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book Serafina had never expected to read. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Briggs with breakfast, spent her mornings tending the struggling rose garden, and her afternoons learning the rhythms of ranch life. Thaddeus was gone most days, riding the boundaries or handling sheriff business in town. But when he returned each evening, she'd catch him watching her from the kitchen window as she worked among the flowers. They were careful with each other, polite, respectful, orbiting like distant planets that might collide if they drew too close. He'd given her his name in a brief ceremony with the circuit preacher, but the marriage certificate felt more like a business contract than a promise. Still, something was changing between them, slow as the roses beginning to bloom under her. "Patient care. You've got the touch," Mrs. Briggs observed one morning, watching Serafina coax new growth from a particularly stubborn climber. Emily would be pleased. Serafina had grown to love the older woman's blunt honesty. "Do you think she'd mind?" Me being here. Child, Emily Kane was the kindest soul I ever knew. She'd want Thaddeus to be happy, even if it means sharing her roses with another woman. Mrs. Briggs paused, studying Seraphina's face. Question is, are you planning to make him happy, or are you just marking time? Before Seraphina could answer, the thunder of hoofbeats echoed across the meadow. Thaddeus rode hard toward the house, his horse lathered with sweat, his face grim as winter sky. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, striding toward them with purpose that made Seraphina's stomach clench. Pack your things, he said without preamble. Both of you. We're leaving for Denver on the morning stage. What's happened? Mrs. Briggs demanded. Thaddeus pulled a telegram from his pocket, the paper crumpled from his tight grip. Got word from the marshal's office. There's been trouble brewing since the marriage market. Seems someone's been asking questions about my wife. Lots of questions. You can feel the danger closing in like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Seraphina's mouth went dry. What kind of questions? The kind that come with bounty money attached. Thaddeus' gray eyes were hard as flint. Turns out your brother Thomas wasn't just stealing horses. He was working with a gang led by a man named Silas Blackwood. When Thomas got captured, he talked. Told them about his family, about where his sisters might end up. The name hit Seraphina like a physical blow. She'd heard whispers of Silas Blackwood, a man who dealt in stolen goods, murdered witnesses, and had a particular taste for revenge against anyone who crossed him. If Thomas had betrayed his gang, they want me, she whispered. As leverage. More than that. Thaddeus' voice was deadly quiet. According to my sources, Blackwood's been tracking down everyone connected to your brother's capture. Your father's, already dead, found shot in his cabin 3 days ago. Your sister's. He paused, and Seraphina saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. Margaret and Ruth were taken from their new homes. Clara's husband hit her, but barely. The world tilted sideways. Seraphina gripped the rose trellis for support, thorns biting into her palm. Papa was dead. Her sisters were in the hands of monsters. And it was all because Thomas had been fool enough to trust the wrong people. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I hoped I could handle it quietly. Put out word that you were under my protection, that anyone who touched you would answer to me. Thaddeus ran a hand through his hair, looking older than his years. But Blackwood's got a small army, and he's not the type to be intimidated by a sheriff's badge. Mrs. Briggs stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Then we fight. This is our home, Thaddeus. We don't run from vermin. Not this time. Thaddeus' tone brooked no argument. I won't lose. He stopped, his eyes flicking to Seraphina. I won't lose anyone else to my stubborn pride. The words hung in the air like a confession. Seraphina felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, exactly, but recognition. He cared about her. Perhaps not love, not yet, but something deeper than duty or pity. No, she said quietly. Both Mrs. Briggs and Thaddeus stared at her. No, she repeated, stronger this time. I won't run. My sisters are out there, probably scared and hurt because of something I can't control. My father's dead because of my family's mistakes. But I won't let fear drive me from the first place I've ever felt like I belonged. Seraphina, Thaddeus began. You gave me a choice once, she interrupted, stepping closer to him. At the marriage market, you said I could choose what I wanted from our arrangement. Well, I'm choosing now. I want to stay and fight for this place, for these roses, for the life we're building together. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand perfectly. She reached out with her good hand, her fingers touching his chest where his heart beat strong and steady. I understand that I'm tired of being treated like something broken that needs protecting. I understand that Emily's roses are blooming again because someone finally loved them enough to stay. And I understand that you're not the only one who's buried their heart. The admission surprised them both. Seraphina had never spoken of her own losses. The childhood sweetheart who'd turned away when he saw her withered arm. The dreams of love and family that had died one disappointment at a time. But standing in the shadow of Emily's roses, with danger closing in and Thaddeus looking at her like she was something precious, she felt those buried hopes stirring to life. They'll come at night, Thaddeus said finally. Blackwood's men. They'll try to take you quiet-like, avoid a confrontation with me if they can. Then we'll be ready for them. Mrs. Briggs nodded grimly. I've got my husband's old shotgun in the closet. Still know how to use it, too. Thaddeus studied both women, and Serafina saw the moment he accepted their decision. His shoulders straightened, the sheriff taking charge. All right then. But we do this my way. Mrs. Briggs, you'll take the guest room tonight. It's got a clear view of the back approach. Serafina, you stay with me. Not for propriety, he added quickly, seeing her expression. For protection. If they get past me, you'll need to be where I can reach you. As the sun set behind the western hills, painting the sky the color of blood and roses, Serafina found herself standing in the doorway of Thaddeus' bedroom. The space was spartanly furnished but comfortable, dominated by a large bed that had clearly been built for two. On the nightstand, she noticed Emily's photograph had been turned face down. I can sleep in the chair, Thaddeus said, misreading her hesitation. No. Serafina entered the room, her decision made. We're married, Thaddeus. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. He nodded, something shifting in his expression. Together, then. As they settled in to wait for whatever the darkness might bring, Serafina couldn't shake the feeling that this night would change everything. That by morning, she'd either be dead or discover what it truly meant to be Thaddeus, Cain's wife. But outside, in the gathering shadows, something moved through the rose garden with deadly purpose. And the scent of blooming flowers couldn't quite mask the metallic tang of approaching violence. The attack came at 3 in the morning, when the moon had set and the world lay shrouded in that perfect darkness that precedes dawn. Serafina woke. To Thaddeus' hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but urgent. They're here, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the night sounds. 5 men, maybe 6, moving through the roses. She could hear it now, the soft crunch of boots on gravel, the whispered commands, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind felt strangely clear. This was what she'd been running from her entire life. This moment when everything she'd built could be torn away. What do you need me to do? She asked, sitting up in the darkness. Thaddeus was already moving, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. Stay low, stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Thaddeus, promise me. His voice was fierce with desperation. I can't lose you too. Not when I've just found you. The words hit her like a physical blow. In the space of 3 weeks, she'd become something worth losing to this man who'd buried his heart with his first wife. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a strength she'd never known she possessed. You won't lose me, she said, her voice steady as stone. We're broken things, remember? We're harder to kill than most people think. A crash from downstairs cut off his reply. The front door splintering inward. Heavy boots on the wooden floors. Mrs. Briggs' voice, sharp with authority. That's far enough. You sons of bitches. The boom of her shotgun echoed through the house, followed by cursing and the sound of men taking cover. Thaddeus moved to the window, peering through the curtains at the yard below. Briggs got one, he reported grimly. But there's more outside. They're trying to surround us. Another shotgun blast, then the distinctive crack of pistol fire. Mrs. Briggs cried out, not in pain, but in rage. Something heavy hit the floor downstairs. Cordelia, Thaddeus called out. Still breathing, came the reply, though her voice was strained. But they're in the house now. 3 of them, heading your way. You can taste the gunpowder in the air, feel the floorboards vibrating under the weight of men with murder in their hearts. Serafina pressed herself against the wall beside the bedroom door, watching Thaddeus position himself behind the heavy oak dresser. His hands were steady on his Colt .45, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked as he calculated angles and odds. Footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate. The creak of old wood under careful weight. Sheriff Cain. The voice was cultured, almost pleasant. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Thaddeus' face went hard as granite. Blackwood. Indeed. May I come in? I'd prefer to discuss this like civilized men. After you murdered her father and took her sisters? I don't think so. A soft chuckle drifted through the door. Those were merely business transactions, Sheriff. Thomas Hartwell stole from me, then betrayed my trust. Honor demands satisfaction. Surely you understand. You wore a badge long enough to know that actions have consequences. The only consequence here is you leaving my land in a pine box, Thaddeus replied, his voice deadly calm. Ah, but that's where you're wrong. The door handle rattled, tested. You see, I've brought along some additional incentive for negotiation. Another voice, younger, terrified. Sarah? Sarah, please, don't let them. Clara. Seraphina's heart lurched. Her youngest sister was alive, here, in the hands of these monsters. Yes, Blackwood said smoothly. Little Clara, such a sweet child. It would be a shame if something unfortunate happened to her because of your stubbornness. Thaddeus met Seraphina's eyes across the room. In that look, she saw him weighing her life against her sister's, calculating the impossible mathematics of love and sacrifice. She also saw the exact moment he made his choice. No, she whispered, reading his intention. Thaddeus, no. But he was already moving, stepping out from behind the dresser. All right, Blackwood, let's talk. The door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges by a boot that could have felled a tree. 3 men poured through, Blackwood in the lead, distinguished and deadly in his dark suit, flanked by 2 hardened gunmen who looked like they'd been carved from leather and violence. And there, held tight against one of the gunmen's chests with a knife to her throat, was Clara, 13 years old, tears streaming down her face, her dress torn and dirty from whatever hell she'd endured. Much better, Blackwood said, studying the room with the air of a man appraising furniture. Now then, Sheriff, I believe introductions are in order. This lovely young lady is the reason for our visit. His cold eyes found Seraphina. Miss Hartwell, or should I say Mrs. Kane? Congratulations on your recent nuptials. I do hope you'll be very happy together, for however long that might be. Let my sister go, Seraphina said, stepping forward despite Thaddeus' sharp intake of breath. Your quarrel is with my brother, not with her. Ah, but that's where you're wrong again. Blackwood's smile was all teeth and no warmth. You see, your brother's betrayal cost me a great deal of money. Money I intend to recover, with interest. And you, my dear, are going to help me do it. I don't have any money. No, but your new husband does. This ranch, his cattle, his reputation, all very valuable commodities. I'm prepared to trade one sister for all of it. A bargain, really. Thaddeus' gun never wavered, trained on Blackwood's chest. You're assuming I won't put a bullet in you right where you stand. Of course you won't. Blackwood's confidence was absolute. Because the moment you fire, my associate here will open the little girl's throat. And then my other men outside will burn this house to the ground with all of us in it. No, Sheriff, the only way anyone survives this night is if you're very, very reasonable. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Seraphina could hear Clara's terrified breathing, could smell the fierce sweat and gunpowder, could feel the weight of impossible choices pressing down on all of them. Then, from somewhere deep in her memory, she heard her mother's voice. Sometimes, darling, the only way to win is to change the rules of the game. There's another option, Seraphina said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, her withered arm held close to her body, her good hand steady at her side. I'll come with you willingly, she said. No fuss, no fight. Let Clara go, leave my husband and Mrs. Briggs unharmed, and I'll give you exactly what you want. Seraphina, no. Thaddeus started. What exactly do you think you're offering? Blackwood asked, amused. Seraphina smiled, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly dangerous. Bait, she said simply. My brother's still out. There's somewhere, isn't he? Still running from you? Well, he'd come for me. You know he would. And when he does, you'll have your revenge and your money. Blackwood's eyes sharpened with interest. Go on. But if you kill me here, if you hurt my family, Thomas will disappear forever. He'll change his name, find some hole to crawl into where. You'll never find him. Your revenge dies with me. It was a desperate gambit, built on hope and bluff in equal measure. But as she watched Blackwood consider her words, Seraphina felt something she'd never experienced before, the intoxicating rush of holding power in her own hands. The question was, would her broken wings be strong enough to carry them all to safety? Or would this be the moment when everything she dared to love was torn away forever? Blackwood's laugh was like breaking glass. Clever girl. Very clever. Indeed. He studied Seraphina with the cold appreciation of a snake examining a particularly interesting mouse. You're offering yourself as the worm on the hook. I'm offering you a choice, Serafina replied, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her throat. Take what I'm giving you willingly, or lose everything trying to take it by force. The outlaw leader considered this, his pale eyes calculating odds and outcomes. Behind him, Clara whimpered as the knife pressed closer to her skin. The sound made something snap inside Serafina, a protective fury she'd never known she possessed. Decide, she said sharply. Now, before my husband loses patience and puts a bullet between your eyes. Thaddeus' gun remained trained on Blackwood's heart, his finger white on the trigger. Sarah, he said quietly, whatever you're planning, don't. I won't lose you. You won't, she promised, meeting his eyes. Trust me. It was then that Blackwood made his fatal mistake. Misreading the current between husband and wife, he assumed Thaddeus would choose his own life over a bride he'd known for mere weeks. Very well, Blackwood said. The girl comes with me. We'll use her to draw out her brother, and when we're done with him, perhaps we'll discuss terms for her return. No terms, Serafina said, stepping forward. I come willingly. Or not at all. And if I come, my sister goes free. Right now, those are my conditions. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Blackwood nodded to his man, who released Clara with a shove that sent her stumbling toward Thaddeus. The sheriff caught her with one arm while keeping his gun, trained on their enemies. Smart choice, Blackwood said. Now then, Mrs. Kane, shall we? He never finished the sentence. Because in that moment, Serafina did something none of them expected. Instead of moving toward Blackwood, she threw herself sideways toward the window, her good arm snatching Emily's photograph from the nightstand as she fell. The room exploded into chaos. Thaddeus' gun roared, dropping one of Blackwood's men instantly. The outlaw leader dove for cover as Clara screamed, and Mrs. Briggs' voice boomed from downstairs. Company's coming. Riders from town. But Serafina barely heard any of it. Because as she hit the floor, Emily's photograph clutched against her chest. The glass cracked, and something fell out from behind the image. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. You can almost taste the desperation in the air as gunfire erupted around her. But Serafina's hands moved with strange calm, unfolding the paper, reading the words written in a feminine hand. My dearest Thaddeus, if you're reading this, then I am gone and you have found someone new to love. Know that this brings me joy, not sorrow. In the rose garden, beneath the climbing pink, I've hidden something for the woman who will tend my flowers after me. She'll need it to make this house a home again. All my love, Emily. Understanding crashed over Serafina like a physical blow. She looked toward the window, toward the rose garden where she'd spent countless hours coaxing new life from Emily's legacy. The climbing pink rose, the one that had been most resistant to her care, that had fought her efforts until just last week when she'd finally managed to encourage new blooms. That a shout from outside drew her attention back to the immediate crisis. Through the shattered window, she could see torchlight, riders approaching fast, their voices raised in pursuit. The cavalry was coming, but it might be too late. Blackwood had regained his feet, his face twisted with rage. Enough games, he snarled, raising his gun toward Thaddeus, but Serafina was already moving. Her withered arm might be useless for most things, but it could still hold a photograph. And Emily's heavy silver frame, swung with desperate strength, made an excellent weapon. The frame caught Blackwood across the temple with a sound like a church bell tolling. He staggered, his shot going wide, and Thaddeus didn't waste the opportunity. His second bullet took the outlaw leader's center mass, dropping him to the bedroom floor. The remaining gunman, seeing his leader fall and hearing the approaching riders, threw down his weapon. I surrender. Don't shoot. Mrs. Briggs appeared in the doorway, her shotgun broken open, her gray hair wild but her eyes fierce with triumph. Town marshal's here with a full posse, she announced. Seems someone sent word that we might need assistance. Thaddeus was already moving, gathering Clara into his arms while his eyes searched Serafina for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. No, she managed, though she was shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. I'm fine. We're all fine. It wasn't until later, after the marshal had taken away the surviving outlaws, after Clara had been fed and bathed and tucked into the guest room, after the broken door had been temporarily barred, that Serafina found herself alone with Thaddeus. In the rose garden, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten, painting the world in shades of pearl and gold. The roses, despite the night's violence, seemed more beautiful than ever, as if they'd absorbed some essential strength from the darkness and transformed it into something luminous. Emily's note, Serafina said quietly, showing him the paper. She left something for me, for whoever came after her. Thaddeus read the message, his expression growing soft. Under the climbing pink, he murmured. She always said that Rose was special. Together, they knelt beside the largest trellis, their hands working carefully through the soil until Serafina's fingers encountered something hard and smooth. She pulled it free, a small wooden box, wrapped in oiled cloth. Inside, nestled in faded silk, was Emily's wedding ring, the one that had never been buried with her because, as a note tucked beneath it explained, she'd wanted it to pass to the woman who would love her husband after her. She knew, Thaddeus said wonderingly. Somehow she knew. Serafina held the ring up to catch the first rays of sunrise. It was simple gold, worn smooth by years of wear, but it seemed to hold all the love and hope and promise that marriage was supposed to represent. Will you wear it? Thaddeus asked, not to replace her, but to honor what we're building together. Serafina looked at this man who'd given her everything, his name, his protection, his trust, and finally, his heart, who'd stood ready to die for her, to kill for her, to choose her happiness over his own safety. Yes, she said simply. Yes, he slipped the ring onto her finger. The sun crested the hills and set the roses ablaze with light. In the distance, they could hear Clara's laughter as Mrs. Briggs made breakfast, the sound carrying across the meadow like music. What happens now? Serafina asked. Thaddeus pulled her close, his arms strong and certain around her. Now we live, he said. We tend the roses, we raise Clara if she'll let us. We build something real from all the broken pieces. And my brother? When Thomas comes looking for me, we'll face that together, like we faced tonight. His lips brushed. Her temple. We're not broken anymore, Sarah. We're healed. And healed things are stronger than they ever were before. As the morning light grew stronger, painting the world in shades of hope and possibility, Serafina understood that she'd found something she'd never dared dream of. Not just a home, but a place where broken things could bloom again. The roses nodded in the gentle breeze, their petals bright as promises, and for the first time in her life, Serafina Kane believed in forever. Well now, if that tale don't warm your heart like coffee on a cold morning, I don't know what will. If you enjoyed watching broken souls find their way to wholeness, give this story a like and tell us in the comments what you thought of Serafina's courage. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love conquering all odds in the untamed West. Now then, we'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop a comment and let us know what corner of this big world you're calling home.